welcome everyone to the final session of the APC Innovation Summit Part 2. This presentation by the College of Westchester is titled The Motivating Factor, Engaging Students Beyond the Traditional Classroom in the Time of COVID-19. I'd like to welcome our two presenters, Dr. Erica Schacht and Paula Cancro from the College of Westchester. Just a couple of quick housekeeping items before I turn it over to Erica and Paula. The first is that we are recording this session and it should be available on the APC website probably early next week. And just a reminder, if you have any questions as we're going through the session, please just use the chat function. I will monitor the chat function, so any questions that come up we can address on the fly. And that is it for my introduction. So I'm going to turn it over to Erica and Paula. Take it away.
Well, good afternoon and welcome. Today, my colleague, Associate Professor Paula Cancro, and I are going to share with you two very different perspectives on teaching during the pandemic. But first, a little bit about ourselves. My name is Dr. Erica Schacht, and I have a bachelor's and master's in English literature and an EDD in higher education leadership. I have over 13 years experience in higher ed, and I have been teaching throughout this pandemic, as most of us have. There have been some challenges, but we have also gained some valuable insight. And now I'll let Paula introduce herself before we actually begin the entire presentation.
Thank you, Erica and Donna. It's my pleasure to be here with all of you. And I am an associate professor in our business department and have recently taken on a new role working in our online learning function. My background before higher ed, and I've been in higher ed now also about 13 years, I came from corporate IT and technical training, and loved the training function, which is why I ended up in higher ed. I will leave my semi-geek perspective till a little later when we talk about some of the tools and methods for working in this virtual environment. So I pass it on back to Erica to start us off.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to share my screen. Give me 2 seconds. And I actually have the end of the speech here. So we'll go right back to the beginning. All right, so what were some things that I learned during this entire situation here? Well, my job is predominantly as a first-year professor, and currently I'm actually the dean of the first-year experience. So as you can already imagine, I focus a lot on this particular cohort. And the cohort that we are currently dealing with is the cohort from the fall of 2019. So I'm actually their success coach, and this means that I follow through with them with their grades and their attendance and pretty much just making sure that they're doing well. So one of the things is that it's always been challenging to follow with our students while we were in the classroom with them. So what does this now mean in a world where we're virtual and remote? How do we stay on top of our students and make sure that they're keeping up and that they're showing up to their classes and doing well? So virtually has actually been a lot easier because I see my students all the time, and then I can actually follow up with the students that I'm not teaching. And one of the biggest things that has emerged from all of this is the idea of reaching out to their other professors. So I can actually be their advocate, right? So we know that a lot of our students are essential workers, and they might have other extenuating circumstances, like perhaps they were sick, or their parents were sick, or somebody else in their family were sick as well, or maybe they had to take care of siblings while their parents were at work. So my job then was to step in and alert their professors and let their professors know that they might have needed some extra time on an assignment, or maybe this was why they weren't particularly in class at the moment, and to kind of just like bridge that gap that existed. And so also I would check in on a daily basis with my students, make sure that they were, you know, kind of adapting to this particular type of learning, and that there weren't any other challenges on their end. We also provided extra drop-in hours. So this was something that we decided to develop the last semester when we first went virtual, to just give our students a chance to pop onto Zoom with any of the professors like myself and Paula and kind of share with us maybe if they needed help on something, or maybe just to talk about what's been going on. So that actually proved to be very valuable as well. And it was really like 1 hour once a week. We'd put a Zoom link up, and it's not like you had a lot of students come on, but you would have some of them come on, and sometimes they just wanted to talk about what was happening. And if you remember way back in March and part of April, it was really, really a confusing time, and the students just kind of needed a place to talk and vent about things. So one of the things that had happened over this time period was students reported that it made the first few weeks less intimidating for them, because going right into this virtual world can be intimidating for anyone, let alone our students who are trying to adapt to this particular new lifestyle. So in the beginning, and when I mean the beginning, I mean let's go right back to March, when everybody thought that this was only going to last a couple of weeks. If only, right? Because here we are in July and it's still around us. And so the first few weeks were an adjustment for faculty and for students. Obviously, students were feeling very overwhelmed because they were getting so much work. And it really was because we couldn't find that balance yet. We didn't know what the balance was at the moment. We had to work through things on the teacher's end and on the student's end. And so I would say by week 4, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. And I don't mean week 4 of this current semester. I mean week 4 back the last semester. So probably around the second week of April, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. And I think everybody started to adjust to our new norm, right? Because that's what they're calling this, our new normal. So faculty started to adjust to the amount of work they were given, and they kind of pulled back a little bit, did a lot more assessments on Zoom with their students, did a lot more asynchronous type of stuff, and it was less burdensome for our students to worry about. And then also we focused on what we call compassionate grading. And so we kind of looked more at assessing our students on a different level than, giving them all these quizzes all the time or all these papers all the time. And teachers themselves found a way to make it less stressful, because that's really the other component of it. How do teachers remain on top of it and motivated? Because if the teachers are not motivated and if the teachers are stressed out, then obviously the students are going to pick up on it as well. And so slowly but surely, students began to adapt to this new learning style. So getting creative, and that's really what this presentation is mostly about, is creativity and motivation in the classroom while we're using Zoom. And so as an English professor, because that's predominantly what I teach, and then looking at it from Paula's perspective as a business professor, we're teaching 2 total different types of, majors here with different types of learning styles. So how do we both engage our students? Now, it's no surprise that when you are a liberal arts teacher, you're more theatrical and more energetic, and you can assign readings and they can read stuff and talk about it. You could have them read poetry and read a short story, and there's more of that natural interaction. But that doesn't mean that there still aren't challenges that exist as well, especially when we are on Zoom. So the minute we were told to switch virtual, which I remember vividly, was the second week of March. And I had actually traveled to Disney the week before, and I remember it because now I think to myself, why did I even go on a plane? But this was when it was on the West Coast, and everybody was like, oh, it's not coming on the East Coast. Don't worry about it. You're fine. And we were taking some protocol, but we went to Disney. And now when you think of Disney World, you think, oh my gosh, why would you go to Disney World right now? So when I came back, we had already had patient 1 in New Rochelle, and it was like, oh boy, what do we do next? And you had to make the decision. And so we were told to switch over, and we had to adapt to this process like literally overnight. And so what did that mean? Well, that meant kind of learning about Zoom and taking advantage of Zoom. And I know in previous presentations, they talked about breakout rooms and whiteboard modifications. And so utilizing what Zoom has. And while Zoom is limited, of course, there were ways that you can become creative. So I actually became an expert at PowerPoint. Now, I do not use PowerPoint normally in the classroom when I'm live, because I am very energetic and theatrical. And so I like to write on the board and walk around. And obviously in Zoom, I think in the beginning I tried to walk around and I had a whiteboard in the background, but then the students couldn't see it because I was so far away. And I had to figure out a different way to adapt to this learning style. And so I started to craft PowerPoints, and the PowerPoints worked out well because just like I'm sharing the PowerPoint with the room, I was able to do that with my students. And then they could take notes, although I will tell you this generation They just take screenshots with their phones. And it's funny because you can hear everybody in the background and their phones are clicking and they're all just taking different screenshots of what I'm saying. And then I would leave the link up later on for a PowerPoint for anybody who might have missed it, or a Zoom recording for anybody who might have missed class. And so that really was very beneficial and helpful as well. So how do we keep things normal? So we have different, majors and departments in the building, as do all of us in the room. And so how do certain majors look for more of a normalcy than others? And so one of the things that have emerged out of this was our allied health department, and they had to look for a way to become super creative with their students. And so how do you practice certain protocol that they would need to practice? So they created little tiny packages with things and sent them to their students just to keep that connection there. Not that the students were going to go take blood from anyone, because they were not, but just to have that. And then one of our professors actually used Zoom and had her students demonstrate proper hand washing protocol. And so this is just a picture of that. These are all the students at their home in their sinks with their scrubs on and their gloves on. And that's how she was able to demonstrate, or show that they were able to demonstrate, this particular assessment. And so that worked out really well. And she had done that subsequently then throughout the semester and the current semester also. So what were some challenges we had? Well, obviously, getting everyone on the same page is always a challenge, even in a non-COVID world. So imagine in a COVID world, getting everyone on the same page. And that took some time. There was some tweaking and, reiteration. And now that we're in our second semester and we're actually nearing the end of our second semester, it's going very well. It's like a smooth transition. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that we also had Zoom and Moodle issues in the beginning. And I know everybody is aware of the Zoom issues. And thankfully, we didn't have many of them, but other colleges had reported and other businesses had reported people just popping in on their Zoom and like random people showing up and some saying terrible things. And so, how do you work through the Zoom issues? And then Moodle in the beginning, or any of the LMSs that you all are using in the room, there's a lot of people on it. So how do you work with that? How do you get past that? And so, we fine-tuned a lot of this. But the next part is really important to the motivation with students. And that's, how do you provide contact hours and lesson hours for the classes? And then how do you find a balance between classwork and homework? So before I go into the next slide, what I'd like to share is some of the things that had worked well for me. Typically, I teach these students in their first semester. So if you can imagine, because it seems so very long ago, but if you can imagine back in fall, so September of 2019, when things were normal and we were all looking forward to the summer because we thought, oh, 2020 is just going to be great and it's going to be such a wonderful year. And there was no such thing as COVID yet. I had this group of freshmen, and there was about 140 of them, and I taught them in a class that we call transformative learning, which is the class that they use to transition from high school to college. And so I followed all of them. I had all of them, every single student that entered our building in fall were my newbies, I call them. And I followed them throughout the fall, and then I wound up having probably about 50 to 60% of them again the second semester in English composition too, so we could keep that connection vital. Well, we locked it down in the middle of semester 2. So what did that really mean with my students? How do you keep them engaged now when they have to make this transition and they're so used to having Ms. Schacht in the classroom and now she's on Zoom? And, I might not, remember, if we all can remember when you had to go back on Zoom, it was very tough those first few weeks, to get yourself out of your pajamas and to get yourself on the computer and turn the camera on. We were all, and I don't know if everybody in this room necessarily was, and you're more than welcome to share in the chat box if that was the case. But I think everybody was at a stop, right? At a standstill, because we didn't know what was happening. Everything was around us was rising. We were nervous, and it's natural to feel anxiety ourselves, as they're calling it now, COVID anxiety, right? Our students were also feeling it. So I think like the first 2 weeks, I was like going to class literally in my pajamas. They couldn't tell because I had a different top on. I was like, all right, you got to get out of this funk, Erica, because the students are relying on you as that motivating person. So I started to do my hair, put my makeup on, put a nice top on, and then come to class super excited. And the more I started to do that, the more they picked up on my energy. And then next thing you know, more students have their cameras on. And then our first round, we were doing half Zoom, half asynchronous. I started having students requesting, can I do Zoom every day? And they wanted me on Zoom live every day. And I get it, because back in March and April, it was kind of just like, we need to see people. We needed interaction. We couldn't leave our homes. And what were you doing in your spare time? And, you know, eventually Netflix gets boring, and especially for the students, and how many video games can they possibly play in a 24-hour time period? So we would start to go on to Zoom every day during their class period times. And I had high volume at this moment. So that was really critical. And I used that as a learning experience and a teaching moment for the new semester that was coming around. So as we went on break, I spent the whole break working on how can I develop my LMS, and how can I develop my Zoom skills, and how can I use technology to really, really, really motivate my students and engage them, even if they're behind the screen right now and all I see is a name. I don't really know if they're there. So I started thinking about certain things, and you know, we had decided that I would teach my cohort again in the third semester. So imagine it's like a high school year, and you have your students now the whole entire year. You have them their first quarter, their second quarter, their third quarter, and their fourth quarter. And I had not done that since way back when. So this was really exciting for me, because I was able to have my students again that third semester, and we're currently in the third semester right now, and follow them as their success coach when we typically only teach them in their first and second term. So what that did now was it created that interaction. I was there, they were seeing me, and I was basically helping them navigate the waters of this new crisis. And it was just a familiar face for them. They felt very comfortable with me. And we wound up having most of them in all of my classes. And I'm happy to report I had like over 80% of that original population. And I teach them every day because they signed up for 2 of the 4 classes I'm teaching. And so that was really, really vital. And, you know, I saw a great success in that, because I teach 8 a.m. And I don't know how many of you in the room actually teach an 8 a.m. class, but even before we went to virtual world, 8 a.m. was challenging enough to get the students motivated to come. The only benefit to an 8 a.m. in the virtual world is that they can just roll right out of bed at 7:55, turn the Zoom on, and there they are. And so we make jokes in my class when it's like 8:05 and all of a sudden everybody's joining. And I said, okay, did we get lost between the kitchen and where your computer is, or the bathroom? And, you know, keeping it light has really helped motivate the students. So that's what I found to be very helpful in terms of motivating them. And most of my 8 a.m.s will turn their cameras on, and, you know, some of them obviously really just rolled out of bed, but for them it's like social hour. So I'm teaching them and they're learning, but it's social hour because I have a class, my 8 a.m. is a class of 30, and I'm happy to report that I almost always have 28 out of 30 students. So I actually have higher attendance now in the virtual world than I did when we were ground. So that has been very interesting. So that was one of the plus side of the virtual learning. So you're probably wondering, what class was I teaching at 8 a.m. and why would they be so interested in joining? Well, it was public speaking. So the public speaking, I don't know how many of the people in the room teach any type of public speaking at all or ever did. You need to be in front of an audience to do public speaking. But in the world of COVID, and just like this particular presentation, we've needed to adapt to that lifestyle. So my challenge was, how can I teach them and help them better develop their public speaking skills, but still want to come to class and then still want to do their speeches when many of them have anxiety to begin with, many of them get nervous. And so that was a little bit of a challenge. And finally, it dawned on me right before we went back to school, videos. They're always on Snapchat. They're always on Insta stories. They're always on Facebook. They're always sending videos to each other. I mean, there's so many video apps that they use that I half the time they tell me something and I have no clue what they're even talking about. So I decided I was going to give them a bunch of speeches, and half of them were going to be on video. And when I tell you, the videos were so wonderful to watch. They made me proud. Like, I almost started crying because I was so proud to see that they adapted to this type of learning, and that I was part of that journey for them and helping them help to motivate them to get there, to want to do well and to want to really do well in these videos. So they started to learn how to edit videos. They started to learn how to upload these videos to YouTube. And half the time I felt like I was watching one of the do-it-your-own channels on YouTube, and they were like flawless, so that by the time the fourth speech came around, so our fourth speech was a how-to. So they had to demonstrate something, and it was amazing. I mean, they were demonstrating everything from how to wash a car, how to do their makeup, how to cook macaroni and cheese, how to do a dance. I mean, I had a girl dancing with her sister. It was just so creative that, you know, I felt so proud as their professor, but I felt more proud that they were able to overcome what they're currently dealing with, right? Because we know this is very challenging for our student population to begin with. And I'm happy to say that we're in the second half of the semester now with like 4 weeks left to go. And they just did their live. And by live, it's what we're doing right now. They had to all turn on the cameras and they had to do a live Zoom. There was no practicing. There was no, oh, I messed up, let me edit it and put a new copy in. And they crushed their live videos that, you know, again, I get on every morning with them and it's like, I feel like Dr. Phil because I'm like, I'm so proud of everybody and you're all doing such a great job. And it makes them feel special. They are special, but it makes them feel even more special because I feel that they've done so well. And it doesn't matter who else is watching and thinks we're crazy. I just know in that moment that they're making me feel that everything is worth it right now. And so they're now in speech 6. They have one more speech to go, and they're geniuses. They could teach the class. In fact, I think some of them can teach the class better than I can. And so I'm really, you know, that's one of the biggest things to emerge from this COVID learning is public speaking, because that's the one that's the most unique. It's not like reading a story in English, and it's not like doing a math problem in math. It's like, how do you teach them how to be these great speakers and develop this oral communication skills while you're on Zoom? And so how I ended it with them was, this is probably going to be the new norm for a while. And when you're going to look for a job, the interviewers, you know, the companies are probably going to have you do your first round on video. They're going to want you to hop on a video. They're going to want you to do a virtual type of one-on-one. And you gotta learn how to do that, because being on Zoom is very different than being face-to-face as well. Picking up on body language might be challenging. And so I was able to teach them all of that and still motivate them. And I'm happy to say, and I don't want to toot my own horn because I don't do that, but I'm happy to say that most of my 8 a.m. said that that's their favorite class to come to. And I never thought a student would say an 8 a.m. class was their favorite class to come to. But it does matter as professors. And for those of you in the room that are professors and those of you in the room that are teachers, it does make a difference how we are interacting and how we are projecting ourselves. Again, I woke up this morning tired, it's hot, it's week, I don't even know what week it is anymore. I don't even know what day it is anymore. And I was like, oh gosh, I gotta get on at 8 o'clock in the morning. What am I gonna do? And the minute I got up, got ready, turned the camera on, it was like, good morning, everybody, how are we doing? And they had no clue that these were the struggles that I may have been going through. And so I know we're all in the same boat there. So the next slide is really more about my reflection on what I've learned throughout this time. And so we're towards the end of the semester, as I think most of us in the room are. I think everybody's found their footing, especially the faculty, but even more so our students. You know, it was not easy for them. Although this morning a student said he was zoned out, and I said, did you mean zoomed out? And he's like, oh no, zoned out. And I'm like, zoomed. I guess they're the same thing in this world. And he was just saying that he was zoned out because he's always on the camera. And I know that that's a challenge even for us in our role. So now I'm like, all right, what are we gonna do next, folks? Here's the next idea. So last week we did a mask contest. And I don't mean a mask like a Halloween mask. I mean getting them motivated to demonstrate the masks they all wear when they go out. So in 2 of my classes, we had mask contests, and they all turned their cameras on. Some put their masks on. Some kept their masks on the entire time. Some of them had adorable masks. Some of them, one student had a watermelon mask that he put over his head that had eyes in it. And it really helped them take a step outside of this COVID world and kind of focus on something that had nothing to do with teaching and nothing that had to do with what was going on outside, but was kind of teaching them masks make a difference, right? So they voted, we did a poll, I know that in the webinars, we don't have the poll option, but in a regular Zoom session, you would, and they did polls and they voted on who they thought did well, and I gave extra credit. I wanted to keep them motivated. So next week we are doing sports because, you know, sports right now is all kind of up in the air and it's weird and who knows what's happening, and they're playing sports, but there's no people in the stands. And I don't know who saw the recent Met-Yankee game. You look in the stands and there's just like pictures of people sitting there and things like that. So we're going to do a sports contest. So they get to wear a jersey, a baseball hat, a t-shirt, whatever they have for their favorite sports team. And they'll get extra points for it because I have to motivate them. And they'll vote on who has the best get up. And they were so excited because they haven't gotten to wear this gear yet because they're not going out. So they actually can look forward now to dressing up for class and partaking in this. So that's really what I've done as motivating and engaging. And I encourage all of you in the room that if you are looking for ways currently or in the future to keep your students motivated on Zoom, don't make it all about talking about the subject. Yes, obviously we should be teaching them, and yes, you should spend a good 45 minutes to an hour teaching them the lesson and engaging them that way, but look for ways outside of the box to bring them to your classroom, to bring them to turn that camera on, to make them see that this is as normal as it is. The only difference, and this is actually one of my students' quote, in the beginning of this semester, I said, I miss everybody. You know, I wish we were all together. This is kind of weird. And the student was like, you know, Ms. Schacht, we are together. We're all on Zoom together. We all see each other's faces and we see you. So while we're not in the classroom together, we still see each other. And that stuck through me now this entire semester. And I remember that every time I turn on my video. I might be in my house, they might be in their house, but I even have students who are on their way to work and turn their cameras on because they want to partake in the lesson. And just last week, I had a student that said this was the highlight of her entire week, coming to my 115 class because she doesn't socialize with anybody else. She stays home, and this was, you know, this is how they interact. So, you know, to end my part of this up, most of our students have adapted. You're always going to have those small students that have not, but over the course of 16 weeks, because I'm counting the 6 weeks we were in quarantine in March and April, the students have definitely adjusted. And the number of students now is so much lower than it was in the beginning. You know, in the beginning, a lot of them had much more anxiety, and they've kind of learned now that this is what we're dealing with, and this is what we're going to kind of have to deal with for a while until we know what's going on around us. So, you know, I'll leave you with this. We have to try to make the virtual classroom as much of a real classroom for them as we possibly can. Anything you did in the real classroom when you were face to face with them is what you should be doing when you're on the camera, right? Sometimes snafus happen. You know, if you have children, they pop in to the video. I have a dog, so my dog, and that's why I'm facing the wall right now, because my dog likes to roll around on my couch in the background, and she rolls around and rolls around and rolls around, and all of a sudden I see all the students with their cameras on laughing. And I'm like, I didn't say anything funny. What's going on? And I check in the background and there's my dog rolling around. And so they get distracted, right? So we all know that sometimes in this virtual world, your children can be distracting, your partner could be distracting, your animals can be distracting. And so how do we work with that? I think it makes it all the more fun. I think that that actually livens up your classroom. So finally, you know, students are reporting better interactions with this type of learning, better communication. I mean, how great is that our students are actually saying they feel like they have better communication with their faculty in this virtual world. Maybe we're all getting soft because COVID's happening around us, and maybe, you know, this type of new normal has made us all just appreciate, and that is my hope, has made us all appreciate life in general a little bit more. Maybe we've gotten a little bit better in being more compassionate and more empathetic, because after all, that is what it's all about, you know, trying to put ourselves in our students' shoes and trying to put ourselves in our colleagues' shoes as well. But at the end of the day, they still have an eagerness to learn, and it doesn't matter if they're learning on Zoom or if they're learning in the actual physical classroom. And it is our job as faculty to continue to encourage and to continue to motivate them to want to continue to learn, and to understand that even though all hell has broken loose around us, getting your degree is still as critical as ever. And to drop out of school right now, you know, it probably would be not the right move, right? So I will switch it over to Paula now and let Paula go ahead and work on, she'll talk about her experience with everything. And then at the end, we'll open it up for more questions if anybody has them. And then also what I'd like to do at the end is if anybody in the room has best practices that have worked for them and would like to share it with us, I encourage you to do that at the end so we can all talk about it in an open dialogue. Paula?
Okay, thank you. Not sure how I'm supposed to follow that, but okay. So my side of the world, as Erica said, her classes and a lot of the gen ed classes, of course, tend to be more discussion and writing. And on the business side and the office tech side, a number of mine are more hands-on. So I've had to look at some additional technology. Plus the fact, and this is where I said the semi-geek comes in. In my previous job life in corporate, working in IT and in technical training, I always liked the tools. And I'm not going to tell you how far back that goes. But my hair looks wonderful, don't you think? Working with users, picture this in some early times that the technology, the desktop computers were fairly new and people were coming off work and learning how to do things in a totally different way. So moving our students to Zoom and our faculty in a way has recreated this new language, which we experienced when the internet exploded for us and all this use. So what else can we do in here? Sometimes the content and just the focus of the class helps that engagement. What about those classes too that may be required and may not be quite as exciting? There are a number of tools you can use. Plus, as faculty, we have to be comfortable with the tools we have as well. So using Zoom, I am amazed that Zoom has really just taken over the way it has. Some of you may have been in the same boat. We were using Zoom at the College of Westchester. That was just our video conferencing platform that some faculty used when they needed it and some administration. And Zoom definitely had made itself attractive to the education side. Well, now we went from a few people using Zoom to a lot of people, and then all of a sudden the rest of the world using Zoom. So everybody's learned things. Early on, we learned things like changing our virtual backgrounds to have some fun. And so this is where that comes in. Earlier classes I've had my students, one of the things we did was to figure out how you could create your own background. So a little bit of fun at the beginning to play with the tools and get more comfortable. Other things found that, so actually just to summarize up front here is knowing the tools that you want, that you're using, but what is it that you want to do first, and then figuring out how the tools will help you. Corporate, we used to talk about the bells and whistles of some of these tools, which were great, but why would I ever want to use that? This is going to really date me, but I think some of you out here may remember this. Do you remember earlier versions of Microsoft Office that had Clippy? The chatty paperclip that danced around. Clippy finally got retired, but it was one of those things that, oh, how cute. Why do I need that? And so there are some of the tools that, hey, it's great we can do these things, but what am I going to really accomplish, and what are my students going to get out of this? One of the difficulties Erica talked about, and many teachers have spoken about, our students are behind avatars, not even a character or some kind of drawing or photo. Some of them are just a name. How do we bring that into there? And so doing activities that encourage students to do something with that avatar, or come on screen. And I will share with you after, there was actually an article this morning from Faculty Focus that talked about doing an essay, but part of it was also to talk about getting students to put their face on screen and be more involved. So there are a number of things. I want to take a look with you at some of the activities and again with some of the tools out there. And then we have to accept the phone. I am in awe right now at some of my students operating solely on their phone and switching screens between Zoom, and we use Moodle as our learning management system, and they are switching between that, and they are participating in polls that I have during a live class, and so I really want them to come teach me. And the big thing, really know your LMS. Understand what is in a faculty role on your learning management system. What can you do? What can you set up? And how might you use them? Erica, next slide, please. So just an image. These are all the tools that are out there. Phone is probably the biggest. Tablets, desktop computers, laptop computers, Chromebooks. Chromebooks are a wonderful thing. However, if you're teaching a class that involves another kind of software, you need to be aware of that because that could cause difficulty for your students. Tool-wise or hardware-wise, the way we addressed it is that we've had a cart of laptops that students were able to borrow from while they were on campus, so in the library or in a particular class. And once COVID hit, we basically, those laptops became available for students at home to borrow and use, because some of them either had one computer, whether it was a laptop or a desktop, that has been shared between all family members at all times of the day, and especially our freshman students who are 17, 18, and very often have younger siblings who now are in school from 8 in the morning till 2 or something like that, and they also need to borrow that time. Please don't forget parents who are also working from home. And so now everybody's trying to buy time on those devices. Next slide, please. One of the things I did early on was, and this actually, one of the courses I teach in office technology happens to be about getting into all the functions of Word and PowerPoint. And because the course is designed to use the desktop versions, which have some additional features beyond what the Office 365, we are a Microsoft school, the Office 365 online has that students and faculty get, I've had to adjust the way I work with some of those students. I've got a mix in that one class of Windows laptops, Mac laptops, a few desktops, some not so new, and a couple of Chromebooks. And because of all of that, I'm dealing in some cases with a slightly different version of, say, PowerPoint or Word, and also different capabilities of the software out there. And then there are a few students who would struggle in the face-to-face classroom environment, and now we've added online. So knowing not just the equipment and some online tools you can use, but really understanding where your students are and being able to give them time with you and make use of screen sharing and walking through exercises and things like that. That can be a big help. We do record our sessions. I could use some acting practice, I think, but there's good material on there. And with those recordings, one of the tools I want to share with you in a little bit, there is something more I can do with that. Yes, phone is deliberately listed there 3 times. I would put more bullets if it wouldn't get too small, but that is what so many of our students have. As Erica also said, I am in awe of the students who are working, who have had to go back to work more hours because either they were furloughed for a while, or they just lost their job, or now have had to get a job, or have been essential workers the whole time and are now pulling more hours. And a number of them are plugging in while they're at work, but they just message in Zoom at the beginning and say, or get on the mic and say, I'm at work right now, so I'm not going to be able to talk too much, but I'm listening in. And I haven't tested them on it, but I believe if they're logging in, I do have faith that they are paying attention at least part of the time. And for those students, the recordings can be especially helpful. Okay, know your LMS. Absolutely, there are so many versions out there. We have Moodle, as I said, and that, fortunately, with Moodle right now, when they do an update, they're fairly small updates, so we haven't had too many major changes in months. I know a number of campuses have moved from, whether it's Blackboard or something else, to Canvas, which is a bit of a change, but also have faith in yourself. If you've known how to do this in one LMS, you know how to do it in another. You just have to find what they call those steps. So just like learning a new app, it should work for you pretty well. You need to give it the time. Some of the things in your LMS that can be helpful: understand how your discussions work. There are different discussion types, I would say, in all of them. One of the things Moodle has is what they call a Q&A discussion. And that can be very useful if you feel like some students are just kind of phoning it in, so to speak, where that they read someone else's prompt and you get the yes, I agree, or yes, that's good. Q&A discussions force the student to make that initial post and cannot see anybody else's post until they actually make their post. And I think in Moodle, it takes about an hour before they can actually see other posts. So that's something that can help you and them. Students who feel like they're being copied off of feel more comfortable knowing that they've got to get their post in before they see mine. And it can help you as the faculty member by making sure and having an easier way to see who's actually posting and seeing what kind of responses they're giving. Other things you want to know in your LMS: see how you can see where a student has been and how much time they have spent. All of them have some method, either in reports or clicking on student names, so you can actually see logs of whether a student has just viewed something or actually responded to something. If you have a small group, it's you generally have the time to go into that assignment and that discussion and just see that every time. But if you have a larger group, whatever that may mean, whether it's 20, 30, 50, you may want to check some of the reports just to get the overall view of who's been in there and then who to really follow up with. And again, these are features common to just about all, if not all, of the LMSs. And so talk to your online learning person, your IT department, if you're not sure how to get around and find those. One of the things I've done and really used a lot of, especially when we first went online and we were all in this kind of shock mode, and I had started doing this on my traditional online courses as well, is the idea of a check-in discussion. And that is nothing fancy, technologically speaking. It is a simple discussion forum. I require it, and before anything is due during the week, each student is required to check in, even if it's to say, I have no problems. And that also lets me keep an eye on following some students, the ones who are the first to say, I have no problems, and then either the last ones to submit an assignment or always late. It makes it a little easier on me to go back to those which I treat as notes, to go back to and individually follow up if that is what I need to. Now, I want to make sure everybody's understands what asynchronous and synchronous are. These are terms I had learned early on when I got into online learning, but I think they've gotten more popular now, so more of us are in tune with what they mean. But just in case, asynchronous, if you picture a more traditional online class that may not have a live component. The live component is your synchronous. Basically, we're having a conversation, or we are all here in place. And so there are activities you can do this way. And the asynchronous are more like a discussion that you have guidelines for posting, such as make your first post by Wednesday, respond to 2 other classmates by Sunday, or whatever the guidelines may be. So a discussion forum generally is that asynchronous. Submitting assignments, asynchronous, they're just not live. Having a video conference, of course, is live or synchronous. In Moodle, there is a chat function. So it's just text chat, but that would be synchronous. And as long as that chat is open, it's just like texting to each other. I say that texting with me is an asynchronous activity because I'm very bad at looking at my phone. So you may hear back from me a day later. Most normal people, texting very often is kind of a live activity. But remember, I go by semi-geekdom. I like people, but I love technology too. So a side note, something you could check in your LMS in Moodle, there is a setting that you can save previous chats. So sometimes you use those for office hours, sometimes on a particular topic. It also can provide those students who are having trouble with Zoom because of technology difficulties, bad internet access, iffy, even bad cell service. Very often those chats in your LMS are pretty low tech in that they're low bandwidth. They don't take a lot of technical term here, oomph, to operate. And there's a setting just to save them so you can look back. I've had some students take advantage of it. More and more, I have less students take advantage. They'd rather be live or text or email or message that way, and then get on your case because you didn't answer their 1 o'clock email. So I have warned my students that, yeah, you may catch me out there sometimes, but don't expect an answer at 1 in the morning. Or don't expect it to be a habit, because I can make no guarantees. So being creative, some tools you can be creative with. And there are a lot. I just picked 3 right now. And what I'd love in chat, if anybody is familiar with any of these, or you have others in mind that you've used. And again, we'll talk more best practices at the end, but while I'm showing these, we can have that conversation as well. So is there anybody out there who has heard of Edpuzzle? And you can either do a yes or no in chat, or if there's, I don't know if we have reactions or, but okay. So I've got to know. And as I do with my student, if one person, okay, so mostly knows to start with. I did a presentation one time and I called it something like everything I know I learned from a third grade teacher. K through 12 uses the coolest tools to get students interested in things, and they do a lot of things in their classroom. And all of these I have learned from originally, I'm happy to say originally, K through 12 workshops, and then have seen more people in higher ed use them. So what are these? Edpuzzle is a really nice tool that lets you take a video that you can create or pull one in from YouTube, and it lets you add pauses and questions and a chance for a student to go through a video, but instead of being just a 10-minute, half-hour video, provide pauses in there where they may have to answer a question or work on an assignment or some other activity. And if we get a chance, I'll just show you a couple of screens from there in a little bit. But it is a nice, it has some nice functions to add engagement. A couple of the courses I teach on the business side are project management. And in class, we have a lot of conversation in live class or on ground class, a lot of conversation, discussion, turn to your partner breakouts, that kind of thing. And some of it I'll leave to the students to watch the videos, or we'll do the videos in class. I'll pause, we'll talk, we'll do different things. So to put some of that kind of activity back in my classroom, I use a tool like Edpuzzle, and this lets me create that with the pause. So especially if you've missed class, you can still get the content by looking through the video with some of my audio in there to guide you through some of the things we would talk about in class. So that's an example of a tool to use. Okay, next one, TED-Ed. Has anybody used, we're probably all or most, before I go on, is there a cost for Edpuzzle? There is a free version and then there is a pro version. So most of these, and even the free version, if you sign up, I'm not even sure if you have to use your EDU email, but there is definitely a free version that you can get a lot out of. And that's pretty much what I use in there. So, okay. And I'll give you the links, but just to put it out here in chat right now, edpuzzle.com will get you to the Edpuzzle site. And then they just verify. You have to show that you are tied to a school, and if it's not listed, you can add it, and I've never had a problem with that one. The next one is TED-Ed. Of course, the website is ed.ted.com. Got to reverse it. And has anybody used that? Okay. I'm guessing most of us are familiar with TED Talks, and we've used them, or maybe not everybody, I shouldn't say most of us at all. And there are a lot of good ones out there. Well, EdTED is through TED Talks, but what they've done is put out a lot of videos there, and you can create your own assignments using TED-Ed. And the basic way it works is to take a video from TED and put it in this EdTED platform, and they have in the platform a way for you to post some beginning questions, post a section to think harder about it, and then kind of final thoughts. And with both of these so far, Edpuzzle and TED-Ed, you can incorporate it into your LMS, and there may be more ways to make it a little more seamless, but you can put a link in a discussion or just a link out there for students to click on, and it will go right into the platform. And the TED Ed lets you set up these assignments to attach to it. And you can publish them out there, and a lot of faculty members are out there of all grade levels. So there's a lot of examples posted out there you can look at to see how others have used it. You can also, anybody who has shared their stuff, you can save it to your own library and customize it for your own class. And then most of the time, the payback is just to share how you used it. People are interested. So in both of these, there are nice libraries of examples that you can use, customize, and the goal is for everybody to share and see what works and what you would recommend. So there's a lot of good material in there. The third one is VoiceThread. And any VoiceThread users out there? And I'll put the, did I typo VoiceThread? Okay, had to make sure. I'm kind of, I had a typo in one of my slides earlier, and Erica was nice enough to fix it. You may not have known that the correct pronunciation of enhance is really enhance. So in case you were wondering. VoiceThread is a wonderful tool and also has a free version and a paid version. But even with the free version, you can create a free educator account. They do, if you use it with your students, the students have to create an account. Those are free. And with VoiceThread, you can create a different style of discussion. So, excuse me. So you can set up a VoiceThread that might be a video or a PowerPoint and loading it up to the platform. You can record audio with it, so your explanation, what you want students to do with this or to think about, could be a set of slides again, it could be a video, it could be an image. And what students do is comment on it. And the comments appear with a little avatar there, but comments can be text, they can be audio recorded, they can be video. You can record, you can use your phone to record audio, just calling a number, just like if you were calling into Zoom through your phone and not using the video part. So there are a whole slew of different methods to reply to this discussion or post to it. Students and you can reply to each other's comments with all those same options. And because it is your VoiceThread, you can see all the replies and see who's doing what. I believe the paid version has more classroom tools, and I have to check on that part myself. So I look at these as ways to do all of that, as opportunities. And just, I know we're getting into our reflection part, so or our sharing best practices, and I don't want to take up time on that. I am more than happy to communicate with anybody. I'm just going to throw I know you'll have our contact information, but on any of these tools and walk through a little about how I've used them and share with you all kinds of things that I've learned, and I'm looking forward to hearing from everybody else. And that's my cue. So Erica, let me turn that back.
So as we're wrapping this up, I guess what we all want you to just think about is what's next, what comes next, what happens next. Clearly we can't make any decisions until the governor makes a decision officially as well, but you know, we always have to be thinking of the future here. And I think in this new type of world, we're going to have to continuously be thinking about the future and ways that we can be motivating and be engaging and change things up. So before we actually end, and I see things coming through in the chat box. So I'm actually going to stop sharing because then the chats come up while I'm sharing. So what I'd like for us all to talk about is if there is anybody, we only have about a few minutes, and I don't want to keep anybody because I know it's hot out, everybody has to go back to work or want their air conditioning on higher than it is. But if anybody has anything that they want to share in the chat box that they've done that works for them, or if there's anything that you'd like from us that works or recommendations, we are more than happy to share that. And I will put my information into the chat box as well, and feel free to, reach out. I don't know if anybody in the room does something different than what we do. I don't know if anybody in the room has been using different platforms like Google Hangouts or Google Meets. I think they're the same thing. Skype. I'm so not techie, as you can tell. That's all Paula. I just get on a Zoom and I just talk the entire time. And I'm thankful enough that I can talk the entire time. That's about it. But I know that there are a lot of other people who do utilize these Microsoft Teams. I tried, folks. I tried to use Microsoft Teams the first week we went onto lockdown, and I'm like, I can't do this. This isn't working for me. I was very stressed out, and I just stuck to Zoom, and Zoom has been my savior. And Paul is always trying to teach me things, and I'm always like, okay, Paula, you're stressing me out. This isn't working. Don't do it in the middle of the presentation because I can't do it. And I just stick to what I know. But if there's anybody in the room who wants to share with others before we end this, then I encourage you to do so. Otherwise, this was a privilege. We thank Donna and the rest of APC for allowing us to speak. I think in the world of COVID, it is so important to share our own practices, although it's always important, even in the non-world of COVID, of course, but I think more so now than ever, because we really want to make sure that we are capturing everybody's attention and what can we do? And, I encourage you again to be creative, have them do crazy hair day. If you have kids, your children do that in school, have them do pajama day, anything to get your students to want to actually come into the classroom on Zoom and not feel like it's the same. We call it Groundhog Day. I'm sure you all do too. But we call it Groundhog Day in the class. And so when we sign on and we're like, how's everybody doing today? Same thing, same day, except they put the curse word in there, same beep, same day, these kids. And so that's kind of like, I'm sure how we all feel. So thank you. And reach out if you need us.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Erica and Paula. I really appreciate your taking the time, and thank you, everyone, all of our attendees. Obviously, by the comments I'm seeing in the chat, you guys did a great job. Everybody really appreciated it. So I will just say, remind everyone the session was recorded. So check the APC website early next week. We'll have this up and running. And also, if you think of something after the fact and want to touch base with Erica or Paula, just reach out to me. I'm happy to make those connections as well. So with that, I will say goodbye and thank you very much.
Stay safe.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Everyone.
Stay safe out there.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.